As of recording time, a Filipino civilian convoy ship is en route to Sandy Cay within Manila's exclusive economic zone in the Spratly Islands. Sandy Cay finds itself at the center of a new danger zone following a widely condemned ramming and water cannoning incident by a Chinese Coast Guard ship on a Philippine research vessel. Taiwan, with a dozen or so other nations, stood in solidarity with the Philippines. All expressed the concern such coercion threatens regional peace. So, is this simply a territorial dispute for China, or is it part of Beijing's broader strategy to undermine US deterrence in the region? Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Yin Khvat. Joining us today are Domingo Yang, National Chengchi University Department of Diplomacy Assistant Professor, and Ronan Fu, Academia Sinica Institute of Political Science Assistant Research Fellow. A very warm welcome to both of you on the show today.
Hello.
Sandy Cay is fast becoming the new flashpoint between China and the Philippines. On May 22nd, in the waters between Subi Reef and Sandy Cay, a Chinese Coast Guard vessel attempted to drive away a Philippine government ship by ramming it and using water cannons. The Philippines said its ship was conducting scientific research and condemned the Chinese Coast Guard's, quote, aggressive interference. China accused Philippine personnel of unauthorized boarding of the reef. Meanwhile, China's embassy in Manila posted images of a Chinese flag once again unfurled on the Cay. The Philippines denied the images represented a new flag-raising incident. Ronan, let me come to you first. So before we get into the broader strategy, what do you make of the tactics of China at Sandy Cay?
Yeah, so in my view, China's tactics at Sandy Cay escalated dramatically. From in April 2025, just last month, symbolic flag planting, indirect physical confrontation, using the water cannon to attack, the fishermen and basically the scientific research boat. So basically, it marks the very first incident that involved the use of violence in Sandy Cay, right? So that's actually remarkable, and in my view, that represents China's the use of salami slicing strategy. Meaning they try to make small incremental gains that try to gradually change the status quo without, inviting some very provocative, responses from the Filipino and the American side.
Right. And Domingo, I mean, do you agree that there's that escalation, how it's just below the level that would trigger a response from the US?
Yeah, I think this is a typical case of the gray zone coercions, right? So there are basically three layers of China's aggression. The first layer is usually deployed by the maritime militia. And the second layer is the law enforcement, which is the Coast Guard. And the second layer will be backed by the PRA navies, which supporting this kind of aggression from a long distance. So I think Sandy Cay is actually very important to China. Its strategic value lies in its proximities to Subi Reef, which is controlled by the Chinese, and also Strait Islands, which is now controlled by the Philippines. And I think we have to bear in mind that China has militarized Subi Reef, right? They have built all kinds of missile systems on Subi Reef. They have surface-to-air missile systems, anti-ship cruise missile systems, and all kinds of arrays of military communications. And China has even built over 3,000 meter long runway on the Subi Reef. So Subi Reef has become one of strong military outposts for China. So that it's very easy for China to use Subi Reef and extend the coercion over Sandy Cay.
Right. And Ronan, what the goal of the video and the previous unfurling of the flag seems to be that Beijing wants to assert that it has taken Sandy Cay, and this is wrong. Yeah. They have not seized Sandy Cay. Sandy Cay still is under the control of the Philippines. Now, Sandy Cay is very close to Strait Islands. It's actually in the territorial sea of Strait Islands. So is our understanding, therefore, from what Domingo was saying, that they are, in fact, trying to threaten T2 Island?
Yeah, so I actually with Domingo in the sense that, Sandy Cay obviously carries some strategic importance. In addition to that, what I want to emphasize is that it also carries some legal implications from who actually controls Sandy Cay. According to the UN clause, you will be able to generate a 12 nautical mile territorial sea. So that's the reason why actual control of the Cay implies not only strategic meaning but also legal implications.
Right. Professor Yang, so what's your assessment of China's broader strategy? You talked about grey zone.
Yeah.
For these particular features, we had Sabina Shoal earlier in the year, last year as well. Is it about territorial expansionism or is it broader than that?
I think it's both. I think China has always behaved in a very opportunistic way, exploiting chances to expand its advantages, especially during the time of international distractions. Right now, while the world leaders are so preoccupied by the US government, and the US government is in the middle of the deep state reforming, all of a sudden China is making a move on Sandy Cay. So I would anticipate that China's coercion over Sandy Cay will intensify. And I would also like to add that I know that there are many scholars and experts like to use the framework of security dilemma to explain China's assertive behavior as if China has been forced to react aggressively because of United States and US allies' strategic deployment in the South China Sea. For me, I think China's intention to dominate the South China Sea has been very clear. Whether China really wants to not just dominate the South China Sea, but also to expand its sphere of influence to the entire Pacific.
And so, Ronan, let's pick up on that in terms of dominating the narrative. So analysts like David Santoro, writing in Foreign Affairs, Ray Powell in Manila Times, they're essentially saying the same thing. They're saying that, China is eroding US either deterrence or alliances with these two analysts, respectively, unless stronger action can be taken by the US. So in terms of what Domingo just said, China wants to portray the US as a disruptor of peace, as opposed to what I think it's clear for many people, it's actually China that is doing that. But how successfully is it achieving that?
Yeah, so I think it will require a significant effort from Washington to actually do something so that we can stop Chinese further expansion in the region, be it coming from like strategic or even like legal consideration. And this is what in my view Washington should be trying to do in the future, or they should start acting. Okay, so I think they should immediately increase freedom of navigation operations directly challenging China's illegal, and we have to make it very clear, China's illegal activities in the region and also in contested water. And then they also have to deploy more advanced missile systems to help its allied to better deter China's further aggression, right? So I think that's very important. And so that's from the strategic dimension. From the legal dimension, I also think that the U.S. must also try to counter China's legal warfare. And how? This can be done actually by formally rejecting China's legal claims in international forums and in places where China trying to substantiate its legal claim. Taiwan and the U.S. or like-minded countries, we have to work together so that we can disarm legal claims made by China. And sometimes is basically according to some policy analysts in D.C. They also suggest that we can consider perhaps some possibility of economic penalties imposed on China.
There was the joint statement, Domingo, between Donald Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister, Shigeru. And in that, they talked not only that they condemned and were against the unilateral change of the status quo by force, but also by coercion. So do you think that there is an appetite to do exactly what Ronan was saying?
Yeah, I certainly agree with Ronan. There is a need to really push back and to really articulate and clarify this kind of mischaracterization of China's misuse and abuse of international law. And from my perspective, I think there has been a gradual development of the consensus about the necessity to really establish a new security pact in East Asia. I mean, people used to think that when we talk about the concept of Asian NATO, it's something beyond our imagination. But like I said, never say never. I think many of the regional actors in East Asia, in Indo-Pacific, are facing the same threat imposed by China. So given the balance of threat theories, it could be very logical, a natural course of developments that regional actors are thinking about the possibilities to form a new type of security architecture. That's my first point. And my second point is that I do see and I do anticipate that US Congress will take a more active role in terms of establishing a kind of inter-congressional platforms to unify and integrate the congressmen and congresswomen from United States, Japan, South Korea, and maybe Philippines, and to really tackle the legal countermeasures to really push back such behavior of China and its peer aides.
Yeah, so more like a coalition of the willing. Okay, also in May, these satellite images from the analyst going by the X-handle Galliat show how the CCP is maintaining a constant presence in the waters of its neighbours. The first satellite image you can see here is of the area around Scarborough Shoal, and the second shows movement in the Taiwan Strait, together with the top right around the Senkakus or Diaoyu Islands, as they are referred to in Taiwan. Ronan, so the Philippines has publicized, it's been very good at publicizing the Chinese research vessels that is intercepted, especially in May, during Balikatan 2025, and the up to 7 underwater drones it's found in its waters. First of all, before we get into that, I actually want to ask your opinion of the Philippines in terms of what we just discussed, how the US can push back on China. It would seem to me that the Philippines is actually doing a very good job of trying to take charge of that narrative, of not being shy in publishing and highlighting China's aggressions. What's your view?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a smart move, because the use of the drones and everything basically can serve, military purposes. And here's how. Basically, by using the drones and research vessels, they are able to actually collect some very important underwater warfare data, right? These basically can be used for what? Submarines navigation, and people actually, for example, people in Taiwan can actually work with the Philippines, because this kind of data can actually be used for what? For the scenarios in blockading Taiwan, and even a possibility of Chinese aggression, right? So like the fact that the Filipino administration is able to make it to the public and trying to, win the war in terms of narratives suggests that they take it seriously. And I would try to say that, Taiwan and also maybe the US, everybody should try to join the force and trying to just make it widespread so that everybody know what China is and has been doing.
Domingo, yeah, I mean, do these other countries, so those underwater devices, were not just found in Philippine waters, we know, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and yet we don't hear about it. We only hear mostly from the Philippines. Do they need to step up to the plate and, as you say, become a proper coalition that works together on countering China?
Yeah, I think it's a devastating situation. China has been collecting underwater data, or the so-called hydrological data, for many, many years. And these data are dual use. It means that these dual use data can really enhance China's underwater military capabilities and also strengthen China's grasp of this underwater domain awareness. And we know that China is being very serious about building its underwater capabilities, right? According to the data, China is now having about 60 submarines, and 6 of them are advanced nuclear attack submarines. And China has been deploying unmanned underwater drones since 2019 in both Indian Ocean and the Pacific. And some of the PLA-related academic institutes are even developing the most advanced undersea cable cutting technologies. And they even published a paper of such undersea cable cutting technologies. And I think in recent years, we have seen more and more Chinese operations, like what Ronan says, sending out these tracking civilian vessels under the name of scientific research. And we've also seen Chinese forces using lasers and flares to harass Marine patrol aircraft from the United States and Australia in South China Seas, in the general broader Indo-Pacific. And I think all of this are demonstrating the fact that China is expanding its underwater military capabilities.
Right. And Ronan, what is it that what's the hold that China has over them?
I guess we have to consider that in the context of broader U.S.-China competition and competition over influence. And there's also the uncertainty caused by the Trump administration. So essentially, from the structural point of view, these countries usually, they want to be the hedgers. By hedgers, we mean that they don't want to pick a side. So they want to, navigate through the U.S.-China competition and trying to win hearts from both.
So these countries do not feel that they are actually threatened. Their sovereignty is not actually threatened by China. This is why they can take that position?
I think they do feel threatened, but they have some other things in mind, which is mainly about economic benefits and also is the uncertainty of the U.S. security guarantee. Because imagine a war where the U.S. security guarantee is very credible, then obviously you can try to confront China, right? And basically, a lot of countries, they are not actually doing very well in terms of economic development, right? So that's number one. Number two, due to the fact that there's uncertainty coming from the U.S. side. So this country basically will go, what if
this isn't new to the Trump era, though, is it, Ronan? I mean, we observed this phenomenon during the Biden years.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the economic consideration. So I think what makes matters worse is actually the uncertainty caused by Trump. So like I say, they are incentivized not to pick a side, even though they do feel threatened. Because if you were to look at their national white papers issued by Vietnamese or even even Indonesia, to a lesser extent, Malaysia. Malaysia are very, notoriously famous for not to pick a side. They don't even try to criticize China in public. But for all some other countries, even including Singapore, they do make it clear that China actually, poses a challenge, if not a threat, to the neighboring countries. They just want to make sure that actually the international order can still be maintained, so that they want China to behave itself. But obviously, just asking China to do something is not sufficient. That's the reason why I do think that, the governments of this country, they should think twice. Even if they don't want to confront China in public, they should still consider joining the force led by the U.S. and some other European countries who are willing to confront China, so that, some sort of like an under-table coalition can still be at work.
Okay.
I would like to jump in. Thank you, Ronan. I would like to jump in and provide some of the perspective. I think why regional actors sometimes choose not to publicize those sensitive data about China's underwater activities. I think, first of all, there might be a lack of capabilities. It's not easy to detect underwater movements, right? And that certainly require collective works about data sharing and also satellite image sharing. And all this data sharing, satellite image sharing are highly sensitive because they are dual use. And second of all, I think when China is conducting this kind of dual use, gray zone aggressions, many times they're just testing your responses. So that if you tell too much, you're somehow exposing your vulnerability so that they know that what you know.
Right, so you're saying that unless they can actually consistently report every single incident, then they might as well not report any in order to not show the gaps in their capabilities. Okay.
So what they can do is actually to work with the U.S. and also Australia, because, for example, there's a research institute, Rory Institute in Australia. They actually keep good track of what's going on, on the water and also, above the water, everything, Chinese military activities are being, well tracked by some of the institute in some countries. But I agree with you that, some intelligence sharing is key to making this all happen.
Okay. Now, the US's NMESIS anti-ship missile and HIMARS launchers will deploy to the Luzon Strait south of Taiwan for the 9th Kamandang exercise running to June 6th, a Tagalog acronym translating to, quote, Cooperation of the Warriors of the Sea. Kamandang will be held across the Philippines and will also involve multinational forces from the US, Japan, South Korea and the UK. Japanese and Korean amphibious drills are set to take place in the South China Sea facing the province of Palawan. Domingo, let me ask you, so this is a very good example of US and the countries essentially of the first island chain coming together, strengthening their maritime cooperation. So how do you assess this effort to counter China's grey zone or to actually deter military action? And if you can comment on South Korea's participation.
Yeah, I certainly give credits. I think this is the right move. Right now, United States and its regional allies and partners are using extensive multilateral military exercises and this continuous rotation of military postures in the regions to deter and push back China's military expansion. And I think that's a very good strategy to maintain the U.S. military presence there. So according to the statistic, let's take the Philippines, for instance. United States now conducts at least 1 to 2 major military exercises with the Philippines annually, right? And overall speaking, averagely speaking, United States now conducts multilateral large military exercise about 10 to 20 exercises in the Indo-Pacific region. So I think that really shows a clear signal of deterrence and signal of combat readiness and the signal of United States commitment to the free and open Indo-Pacific. And speaking of South Korea, I think one thing we note about Trump's 2.0 is that allies and partners need to step up and shoulder more responsibilities, right? So when we think of a healthy, strong, resilient alliance, is that members of that alliance cannot solely depend on the American power, right? Every member of the alliance have to more or less equally contribute to the security architecture, right? So I think in the future, when it comes to the case of South Korea, more and more voices are suggesting that perhaps it's about time for South Korea not just to focus on North Korea, but it's about time for South Korea to also pay more attention to the first island chain, to the entire Indo-Pacific region.
Yeah.
Ronan, you wanted to jump in on that. I also have a question for you, but you go
So
first.
I think that is what South Korea should do, but I'm actually not that optimistic, considering the possible leadership turnover, incoming leadership turnover. So,
which you think is perhaps more anti-US and more pro-China?
So I think that the most likely person that is going to be the next president of South Korea, if he doesn't change his overall stance, then he's basically are going to take a more pro-China strategy. That's gonna cast a long shadow on the joint effort led by the U.S. and joining by a lot of American allies and some regional security partners. So I'm worried that South Korea might just take a different path, and that's gonna. I would not say be detrimental, but it would certainly be harmful to what they are trying to craft at the moment.
And it would benefit China, especially. So stay on you, Ronan. Do you think that there is a good focus, a strong focus on the US's sort of military exercises, these kind of things? Domingo was talking about the 20-odd exercises in this region. And does this, in a sense, play into China's hands because it is trying to portray the US and its allies as disruptors of peace? especially if the US's strategy focuses on this mainly and does not bring all the different range of measures that you've mentioned, economic sanctions, for example, in order to change, to shift the narrative that China has so successfully managed to repeat over and over again in the region?
Yeah, so I do think that the U.S., at least in particular the Trump administration, needs to come up with like a comprehensive strategy in terms of how to really compete with China and try to ensure the stability of the Asia Pacific. And it's not just about South China Sea, and it's not just about East Asia. It's about Asia Pacific. And then some people say Trump actually has a very clear Indo-Pacific strategy. I don't think that's the case, but I do think that he can actually listen to people who know what they are talking about. And so the idea is actually what you just mentioned. South China Sea is one key area. Taiwan is another key area. The actually entire first island chain should be considered holistically, so that they know how to allocate resources and how to win wars in different dimensions, like informational and strategic and even legal dimensions. So we have to take everything into account. So it's gonna require a lot of effort. And I like what you said. It doesn't just require the U.S. effort. It requires everybody's effort. So everyone should be on the same page, knowing that without necessary effort putting into by relevant parties.
So perhaps they should be a little bit more like the Philippines. Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Domingo Yang and Ronan Fu, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching the show today. Stay safe and see you next time.